All right, we'll get the meeting started. Thank you everybody for coming to the Sustainability Advisory Board meeting on April 5th, 2021. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Margie. Do you have any opening statements before I take roll call?
No, welcome everybody, and please go ahead and take the roll.
Okay, we'll start with you, Margie.
Wait a minute, heard somebody go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go ahead.
Hey, Margie. Pat.
Here.
Eric.
Are you just going by names, Brandon, and not asking us to respond?
Well, no, please respond if you're here. Yes.
Here.
Bob.
Here.
Brad is a no. Lisa.
Here.
Ken is a no. Vic is a no. And I think that's it, right?
Michelle's here.
Oh, and Michelle. Okay. Michelle, are you here?
We can't hear you, Michelle. You're muted. Try again. Just say something. Can't hear you.
I can see ya.
You may have to go with thumbs up and thumbs down tonight. Yeah, she's here. Okay.
All right, just try to work on your connection, Michelle, see if you can get that fixed in here while we get started. With that, we have quorum, so we'll go ahead and get started. I will make an announcement. There is one error on the agenda. We were supposed to have no mow May as one of the agenda topic items. I'm not sure what happened. I must have made a mistake and did not get it added to the agenda. Last week, Monday, was when it got approved to get on the agenda. So it was kind of a crazy day for me. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I do apologize. With that being said, we would like to get that on the council agenda for the 13th, which would mean that we need to vote on it before Thursday. So the only day that really works, we have to give notice 24 hours before the meeting. So maybe Wednesday, if there's a time that works for even just the 5 that are here tonight or 6, that would be enough to get a vote on that resolution that was part of the meeting packet tonight. I don't know if Margie, do you have a time in mind?
I do. I would be available anytime from 4 o'clock on. I don't know, Bob and Michelle, is it better for you if we wait until 5:30 or 6?
It doesn't matter to me.
Okay, Michelle? You might have to send a chat.
So what time are you proposing? Or
Anytime after 4, but I was just checking to see if anybody needed it to be later than that because of work or whatever. Lisa, is there a time that's good for you if you can come on Wednesday?
Anytime after 4 works for me too.
Okay, and how about you, Eric?
On Wednesday, you said?
Yes, this Wednesday.
I work from
Probably second shift
I'm
with our
after
luck, huh?
6 o'clock at night. I'm done after 6 that night. I would have to hide away like immediately after work.
Okay, well, given that and not knowing what other people's schedules are, Vic may be able to attend. I'm sure that Ken won't be ready to yet. So I'm going to assume we'll be going with who's available tonight. Shall we make it at 6:30, Brandon? And it should be a 15-minute meeting. It's a special meeting just to do the one topic. And we already have it in our packets. We just can't discuss it tonight. I heard you, Michelle, you're here.
Yay! Okay, I switched it so that the audio is coming from my headphones, so I think that's what I needed to do. And I am also available that night after 4. So.
Okay, does 6:30? Is there anyone that 6:30 would not work for? Okay, let's go with 6:30, Brandon. That gives us the extra half hour for our 24, 48-hour thing too.
Yep, and some of the other members may be available too. So we'll get that notice sent out tomorrow morning with a new link for everybody. It'll be just like a regular agenda, except just kind of the one topics, special session or special meeting. So just look for that email tomorrow, and then we'll meet on Wednesday. And with that, let's go ahead and get to our first topic item.
Oh, we can't yet. We still have to have the approval of the minutes.
No.
Oh, that's probably what you meant. We called to order approval of minutes from March 1st. I would take a motion in a second. Okay, motion, Bob.
Second.
Who was that? Lisa?
Yes, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor of accepting the minutes as written, please say, oh, no, wait, we have to do a voice vote. Okay.
Gotta do roll
we'll
call.
Call the roll.
All right, so all in favor, say aye. We'll start here with Margie,
Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
and Michelle.
Aye.
And did I say Bob?
Aye.
Okay. So that passes 6-0.
Okay. I would like to remind everybody that if you're not going to be speaking, as in if you're not a presenter, please mute yourself so that we can get the most out of the presentation. And I did that a little too soon. And then later when we go to questions, we can change that back. So, okay, we would, I have to say, we're really thrilled to have you here and to have you presenting to us. We're very anxious to hear about what's going on over there in Parks. Ray, do you want to introduce your presenters tonight and tell us anything
Sure.
you'd like us to know too?
Yeah, thank you. And we're happy to be here too, because I know that SAB, many of you, or some of you, I should say, it's a lot of new faces, but back when we were doing the master plan for Lakeshore Park, we also worked with Smith Group on that process. So they've been involved from the start and going through the process of request for proposals for the architectural engineering design services for the first phase. We chose Smith Group as well. So Greg had been working with us on the master plan. So Greg is back with us. And then Lee from Smith Group's team is taking the lead on this project, really, between him and Greg. So they're both here tonight. And I think they've got some really neat information to share with you, not only on the building design, but a lot of the process behind the building and of how we decided on the location for the building on the site. Margie and some of your board members may recall that early on in the process, one of the adjacent neighbors, I believe, came to the Sustainability Advisory Board meeting and was concerned about some of the trees, vegetation, and some of the wildlife being affected there. I'm happy to say we work closely with them to address all of their concerns. They have come forward supporting the project, and we continue to share information with them. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg and Lee and let them go through the exciting presentation.
Okay. Great. Lee will share. I will talk initially.
Yeah, and let me know if you guys or when you can see my screen, please.
Yep. Okay. I can see it, Lee.
Good to go. Sound is good too.
Good. Okay, my office lights went out dramatically here too because I'm not moving enough. So well, thanks. So yeah, I think if you've been involved in the project, hopefully this is a refresher on some of this, but also we didn't want to, it's been a little while. So just to kind of, from a context perspective, our project is the highlighted circle, just for context, the golf course, this was a site plan version of the recently completed Oshkosh Corporation. So we did the master plan, as Ray pointed out, and now we're implementing the first phase of that, which is the highlighted area at the end of Pinocchio Street. So we're going to go next, Lee. So those who were part of the master planning process, you recall, we looked at the entire acreage of the golf course and tried to think of it as, knit together as one holistic campus, unique qualities to both the east and the west zones, different levels of intensity of use, support facilities, but tied together through native landscape, through trails, and through the handling of water and habitat, green infrastructure, again, very nature focused, passive focused park. So that's still the context that we want to make sure you're thinking of as you're looking at everything in this presentation. The first phase of it is sort of in that inset there was thinking about the four-season building as the first piece to sort of activate this, the more active wing of the park, which is the eastern leg of it. Location being very strategic with it being, at the end of Panoka, tied to Rainbow, tied to Lakeshore, near Mary Jewels. So again, a strategic location for the facility as, central service facility, parking, trailhead, all those sorts of things. The core elements of our scope was that four-season building. Lee will spend a little more time on that later in the presentation. Public spaces around it because of its location on the Riverwalk and such. Parking drop-off, so roughly 80 cars and a drop-off that was serving both the building as well as fishermen and other folks who are using the lakeshore as well. So next. Just some of the overall drivers of the project by location, and these start to become, you'll see these become themes as we get into the design. Water everywhere, being on the river, the confluence with the lake, as well as some of the inland water bodies that were part of the golf course, the lagoons and such too. So really think about that as a design driver from physical form, location, sustainability, obviously. Equally as important, the role of the park itself, the green space around it, the views of that, that large open setting of formerly golf course and how that starts to convert into a park that's not about golf, but keeps those sort of open qualities as well. Thinking about the arrival experience, both from Panoka as well as the Riverwalk, as that keeps expanding and connecting up along the waterway. Thinking about our neighbors, as Ray pointed out, being good neighbors and listening and making sure that as this evolves into a little more active space, that we are truly being good neighbors and thinking about how we can keep all this working well together, and ultimately thinking about how this all stitches together from a fabric perspective. This location is super strategic in tying together, one large park, but also multiple parks as well too. So thinking about that from physical, the cultural, a lot of fabric that this ties together. Next. So that really kind of got us off on a roaring start in terms of how to think about designing this phase one project and zooming in from that macro scale of the master plan, and thinking about how we could turn those drivers into guiding principles that we could use to guide our design, but also to sort of assess ourselves as we move through it. So just kind of going back to what I just presented from the top, how does water become a guiding principle of embracing the water? And that's in terms of views and access, both the river and the lake, and near-term views of the lagoons as well too. And you'll see even later stormwater, other elements, but really thinking about water as our sort of best friend in terms of location of this project. Thinking about, again, equally balancing that serving of the park. So the yin yang of the building is really that there's really no front to it. It's equally tied to the water, to the park, to that arrival. And thinking about, again, how this serves Lakeshore Park as well as Rainbow, and thinking about all the types of events and Four Seasons that it'll serve. Thinking about how the arrival sequence can drive design, both from access perspective, but again, views to and from the building. What it's going to do in terms of serving the regional trails that are starting to connect through here with the Riverwalk. Again, you'll see as we get into some of the details here about how, again, this obviously stitches together things just by its location, but also thinking about how we have refined our design to, in fact, be a good steward with our neighbors and respect them in terms of how we've laid out things like parking and views, and what we've preserved in terms of vegetation and things that were pointed out to us by the neighbors. So next. So one of our first things, this goes back, I think, trying to think of when we did this, Lee, it's been a little while. But we, our first exercise by design, we always, when you're working at a large master plan level, you locate things, but you don't get into the the super detailed level. So we had proposed to Ray as an early step of having a validation of the master plan to really kind of dial this building and parking and all the elements into the landscape. And at the same time, we were starting to hear from the neighbors had some just pointed out some concerns about what trees they wanted to maintain. Again, they live this. This is their view all the time, and so we wanted to learn from that. So we spent some time on site, both fine tuning the program of the project, the building, the parking, things like that. But we also spent time learning about what vegetation was out there, what was valuable, what might not be valuable. Documenting what kinds of trees you had, the age of them, and started to think about again how this project could start to fit better within that landscape. How could we use the golf course layout, which from an overall park perspective is a little challenging, having these sort of east-west linear landscapes that maybe don't want to be quite that once the park becomes a full park. But in our case, that openness for the fairways was our friend in terms of thinking about how we could stitch the parking better into this site to be more sensitive to the neighbors and some of the trees that were protecting their views and their quiet, but also providing habitat and other things that they valued and others do who come out to this park currently. So this was the first exercise of really getting into site verification and starting to, as you'll see in the next slide, adjusting things, tightening up to start to be more sensitive. So on the left was kind of the big bubbles from the master plan of the building, the plaza that would have public space as well as spray ground was a program element, a drop off as well as the parking lot for 80 cars. It was, when you work at 30,000 feet, you tend to space things out. And we learned that we could tighten this thing up. It would actually benefit us from a few reasons. Sensitivity to vegetation was one of them, but also just synergy between programs, having the drop off closer to the building, having the parking a little bit tighter. It gave us a bigger setback to the neighbors. It stitched into the open landscape, protected trees. It also let us use more of the previously disturbed area for the highest intensity of development. It's one of your first things you learn. It's a high point you try when you're doing LEED or other sustainable projects. It's always great to sort of recycle not only materials, but sites that have been disturbed. So by putting the building more or less where the existing building was and putting our drop off and pavements and plazas where there was already disturbance and utilities, it's a lighter footprint on the site, but it also starts to become a cost saving opportunity as well by getting double, triple duty out of the infrastructure you have. So conceptually, that was a tightening up that happened because of that validation step. Next. And then again, never losing sight of the master plan, we took that concept and just stitched it back into the master plan graphic, which you see here. So it's subtle, but it does start to show how the building, all those elements are still accommodated, but just start to work a little bit better. It's starting to show some other elements that are future as well. The idea that this building would be the center of having splash pad and multi-purpose lawns, more trails, future pier. So all those things have, even though they're not in this phase of the project, we made sure that when we validated that they're all accommodated still. Next. And then that brings us to the current master plan or the site plan, which takes those guiding principles and starts to apply them. So the idea of how they become more than just words, how they physically show how the building, the site around it starts to become really, there is no back door to this thing. It equally embraces the water, serves the park, and celebrates the arrival while respecting the neighbors. And ultimately, by all of that, starts to stitch together the fabric of the whole multi-park sequence and the waterways and such. Next. So this is the schematic site plan. I'll use this just to kind of point out where some of the big elements are, then we'll dive into where we are at currently, which is slightly different, but this shows everything kind of put in place. So the Four Season building, again, Lee will talk more about what's in that building, but this starts to locate more or less where the existing maintenance building is. This starts to show the Riverwalk as it's been built, but also what the future phase will look like as it goes through Rainbow Park. It gives you a general sense, so where the drop off is. So one of the big changes was making Pinoqua into the drop off instead of having a separate, a drop off and then parking. That really tightened up the site plan quite a bit. Let us keep vegetation that was there already, and so it just gives us a nice flow to the building. One of the other things that just a technical element was because of the elevation of the river. We needed to raise the building a minimum of 3 feet from a 100-year storm perspective. So that gave us some opportunities in terms of view sheds and visual drama. So it's designed to have a little plinth, which is about 4 or 5 feet above the existing elevation. And so as you approach the building from the parking lot and drop off, we have two different ways of doing it. One is a more dramatic sort of stairway, sort of landscape retaining wall turned stairways, kind of a straight shot. But for where most people are coming from, the parking, it's a gradual ramp up that landscape that starts to serve the building. It serves the plaza around it. That plaza is designed to eventually have the spray ground in it and start to host some bigger events as more of the park comes on board. So just generally, that's the layout, the parking, the drop off, plaza around it, access to it, sort of gentle grading, and then stitching together into the native landscape. Next. And this is what it looks like today. So we're at design development. We're about to submit that at the end of this week. And so you'll see that the general shape hasn't changed. We've refined a couple of things in terms of the drop off. We've just gotten into more detail about the materials, what the pavements are made of, how we stitch together with the overall trails. And generally the materiality is, an asphalt parking lot, concrete walks around the building, and then a sort of native stone as a retaining and seating and punctuation element. And the rest of it is really stitched together with a combination of native landscapes, which is a couple slides later, but generally think about that overall park palette being expressed here around the building. Some other bells and whistles, I'll get into stormwater, other things like that in a couple of slides. One thing we did add between SD and schematic design and design development, looking at the parking lot, it not only has 81 cars, but it does have 4 spaces that are dedicated to electric vehicle charging as well too. So starting to think about that from a sustainability perspective as well. So I'll maybe kind of keep going here, Lee.
Yep.
So one of the big sustainability drivers, kind of going back to the project drivers, was thinking about stormwater itself, how to embrace that versus just handle it. So we want to embrace it. We want to actually celebrate it with our design. So this starts to show a general approach to kind of a low impact green infrastructure approach to stormwater. Thinking about how we use the site itself, which does have lagoons and ponds, and we have a river next to us. So how do we think about a way to use the natural landscape and drainage and swales instead of putting everything in pipes and sending it off, using the grading of that, and then which starts to bring in again other opportunities from native landscape, from a habitat perspective, other benefits. So generally the parking lot goes into one bioswale system, which goes into the old golf course lagoon system, and there's sort of a little mini watershed here that the drop off and things in the building and such tends to go to the north. And so we've taken that drop off element, channeled the stormwater from that into a little mini treatment train that again starts to take an arrival element for the building, for the trail. That little triangle is capturing a lot of folks walking and biking and coming through here, whether it's the building or the park, the trails, etc., and start to make that into a signature feature where it captures the stormwater and becomes part of a little bioswale treatment train that goes along the east side of the building and deck, and starts to so it does some nice things from a stormwater ecology perspective, but it also aesthetically starts to tie all of these water bodies together, the river edge, the building edge, so it really starts to become this sort of seamless landscape that's all driven by how we handle water on the site. So one of our bigger sustainability drivers. You'll see in the next slide, we actually get into even celebrating it further. So think about how we can take a large thing like a roof, which captures water. It's one of our biggest sources. So it's an often forgotten about element in design. Parking lots are a given, you got to handle that, but where does the roof water go? We had a good collective discussion with our team as well as Ray about thinking about how if we're going to have a project that's going to celebrate ecology and stormwater, let's take one of the biggest sources, which is the roof, and not just put it into a pipe and send it somewhere else, but let's try to tie it into the plazas and the building itself. So we've designed the roof to have a single capture point, and we've designed the plaza. This is just a diagrammatic version of it, but the idea of actually capturing that into a downspout that would be released into a little mini treatment train that's integrated into the building plaza. So if you're out there when it rains, it's going to be exciting. When it's dry, it's still exciting. It looks like it's part of the overall park landscape. So it does some, again, one of those elements of just celebrating and embracing stormwater versus just letting it be an element that you treat as a infrastructure problem. Next. And so again, thinking about the landscape, we're looking at the whole park as the driver for this. The general palette for the park, looking at both our region as well as just the scale of the park, would be largely prairies and savannas, and the prairies would be some wet, some dry, depending on where you're at in the park and what you're next to. So we took a cue from that as a driver for our vegetation palette and our plant lists. And so the majority of the park will be this, probably open prairie into some open savannas, and the golf course old landscape sort of lends itself to that. And so we're taking those same mixes that we would have used in some types of vegetation, sort of in miniature, down to our site. If you want to go to the next one, Lee. So this is the site plan with that in mind. So that when you see native seed mix, think about that as a prairie mix. We're trying to, for a lot of reasons, cost and just general sustainability, balancing, a lot of variables, thinking about this as a more of a seed approach. So a lot of native seed mix that will, depending on where you're at, what you're next to, it will be either more of a dry prairie or a wet, type prairie mix. We are factoring in where you see landscape beds that there are maybe a little higher trafficked or visible areas that we would be using live plants for those. And so you see those kind of by the entrance area, by the plaza area. Just knowing the seed takes a little bit longer. The public has an expectation of seeing more immediate return. So just again, thinking about the landscape itself as an education experience where you've got some areas that are going to be, out of the gate will kind of show people what it's going to look like. And then hopefully that will teach folks to be patient for a couple of years to see how all the seed comes in as well. Think about the bioswales as well as that's another landscape type out here that one of the mixes. And then a little bit of lawn where it starts to knit into the adjacent park. Potentially, this is probably an operation maintenance thing. Could be a little bit along, a little mow strip along the trails, but generally really trying to limit the amount of lawn here and have primarily the sort of native seed type landscape with, scattering of native trees. This is showing more of the landscape around, parking lots and punctuating walks. We're thinking there could still be another layer of whips and smaller, trees that could break down the harsh sort of tree line of the golf course as well. That could you don't see in this drawing, but that's another layer we're thinking for a more of a longer range reforestation strategy. Then over to Lee.
Right. So kind of switching gears to focus a little bit more on the building portion of the project now. So one of the things that we did early on, Greg mentioned earlier how we started to position the major site and really project elements on the site to take advantage of the previously developed site, take advantage of the fairways of the golf course. So we knew where the building was going to end up. We knew relatively, how the building was going to be oriented on the site. We did a site assessment to understand where existing trees were, as Greg mentioned earlier. We know what the existing grade is, so that we knew that we needed to raise the building up to get it out of that 100-year floodplain. One of the other environmental studies that we did was a sun study. And looking at this, to understand the sun path throughout the year, and what this does is it starts to help inform where we have shade and where we have shadow, so that can start to inform, if where we have glass on a facade, on the south facade, where we need to provide shade to control that sun. Control and therefore reduce heating costs, reduce cooling loads, that kind of thing. So we started to perform these sun studies. We looked at the winter solstice, the equinoxes, and the summer solstice. And what you're seeing in each one of these diagrams, so shown in yellow are areas that are in full sun. Kind of in this dark gray color, this is obviously where we have shadow. So these are all taken at about around the noon hour throughout each one of these studies. And then this orange face, can you guys see my cursor? Thumbs up or down? Yes, thank you. This orange face of the building right here is a facade where we've identified that we're going to have full sun the majority of the day. So, this is an area that we know we want to provide shade to. So, looking at, and I'm assuming that you guys have seen a diagram similar to this previously, but what this diagram essentially shows is, so your summer sun is high in the summer months, and your winter sun is low. And ideally, from a sun control standpoint, what you want to do is let that winter sun in to warm your space in the winter, therefore reduce your heating loads in the winter. This winter sun also provides daylighting opportunities, so therefore you don't need to take advantage of kind of any electrical lights that would be installed in the building. And your summer sun, what you want to do is typically you want to block that you want to shade that sun from your glazing. So, if you're able to block that sun, you reduce or eliminate any kind of direct sunlight on any glazing or fenestration that you have on a facade. And by doing so, you reduce the cooling loads on the building because you're able to control how the building heats up, I guess. So from those sun studies, what we learned was, this outdoor terrace that was in sun year round. We knew that this is essentially being viewed as an outdoor assembly room. So the primary program of this building in particular, it's a large column-free assembly room that has the potential to be rented out for functions such as weddings or corporate gatherings, potentially an art show. It's basically a community room. It'll be open to rent to the public. It'll be open for use from the Parks Department or really anyone in general. So that's the room that you're seeing here. You've got a pair of restrooms that are accessed from the interior of the building. You've got a pair of restrooms that are accessed from the exterior of the building. There's a storage and mechanical room, and there's a food prep and warming kitchen that's incorporated into the design as well. You've got a large wraparound deck, and this is a concrete slab-on-grade terrace that looks over the park, and the deck this way looks directly over the Fox River. So from those sun studies, like I mentioned, if you remember that orange bar, that orange line, this is the location of that orange line. So any kind of windows that we had on this side, we knew that we wanted to provide shade, and any kind of function that we had here, we thought that it would be advantageous to provide shade, to provide a little bit of shelter from the elements for any park goers as well. So that starts to inform, so we'll be looking at the green arrow in particular on this slide. So this is a rendering that's taken from the drop-off. So as you go up the main entry stairs, you can start to see how we're shading this area of the terrace up here. And by doing so, you start to create this outdoor assembly room, if you will. So it has the potential to mimic the function of the interior assembly room, but being open air, and it also has the potential to be rented as well.
It's also designed to be one of those spaces that, if you think about the future plazas and spray grounds and things like that in the park, it becomes the place to engage that, watch it, so it gives you a kind of a double opportunity it could be for an event, but also just a great place as a parent and just to hang out and watch your family do stuff in the park too.
Yeah, and if you can remember back to a couple slides ago, there will be a lower plaza that will be a part of a future phase of the project with the splash pad. So that'll be on this side or on the left side of the floor plan here. So it'll be a great place to, as Greg mentioned, pull up a seat, picnic table, watch your family, watch the kids in the splash pad, watch the sunset. This is facing west or southwest. So it could be a nice little spot to end your day. And then likewise, focusing on the blue arrow now. So we know that we wanted to shade. We've got quite a bit of glass that surrounds that assembly room, to promote those views to the water, promote those views to the park. Also from a daylighting standpoint as well. But with glass, also, you don't want this to also feel like you're in a greenhouse in the summer months. So, we're conscious of that. And, the way that we have treated this facade is that we've pulled down the roof in this location to, the overhang will act as, a shading element in itself. But then we took it a step further and kind of turned down this roof in this form that you see here to add further shade and shadow to this facade as well. And at the same time, it provides you a little portal. So as you're progressing up that sloped walkway right here from the parking lot, what you get to see is, so you're essentially on axis with your main pair of entry doors here. And then as you arrive in the or on the terrace, this is the view that you're greeted with. So it kind of creates this portal directly out to the water. And likewise on the previous slide, there's another portal here that looks out to the park and then the water to the north as well. And you can see a larger rendering of that. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the exterior material selection for the building, and I think there's a little bit of the site materiality in here as well. So there are a number of considerations that we're looking at when we're considering applying exterior materials to this particular building. Cost is, of course, a factor, as well as quality, durability, and anything that would provide a level of limited maintenance to park staff. This is a public use building after all, so we want to make sure that it's constructed of durable materials that are not necessarily maintenance free, but maintenance light. Give Ray and his team a little bit of a break from year to year. But then also considering the environmental factors of each one of these materials. And then its aesthetic value and looking at precedence examples from the Oshkosh Corp headquarters that's also within Lakeshore Park as well. So the primary building materials that we're looking at are daylight glazing. So this will be the glazing that I mentioned that will be mostly surrounding the assembly room, so the primary space of the building. Cast in place concrete walls with custom form liner, which you'll see in a couple later images. Wood look metal panels we're thinking about this material for the underside of the roof. Composite wood decking for the deck that wraps on 3 sides of the building. And then we're looking at standing seam roofing for the roof itself, as well as the 2 areas that the roof turns down to meet both the terrace and the site on the south side of the building. And then Greg mentioned previously the seeded native landscape, the concrete and the limestone. And you start to see a little bit of how, especially with the concrete and the limestone, how, the colors and that kind of, how these materials from both building and site start to relate to one another, from both a kind of a color, and well, yeah, kind of from a color and, well, I guess there's concrete and wood look and wood look. So we're trying to create a kind of a unified palette between building and site. So breaking each one of these materials down from the building standpoint at least, we'll be looking at vision glazing with fritted glass panels. So for those of you that aren't familiar, fritted glass is essentially, it's a process of baking an enamel coating onto the glass surface. And the benefits of fritted glass is that it can be opaque, or there could be a level of transparency to it. But what this ends up doing is it ends up reducing glare, reduces the cooling costs for the building. It's a lower danger to birds because it's more visible to birds, and it gives the exterior a distinctive look. The cast in place concrete walls with the custom form liner, kind of going back to the durability of the material. So concrete has an unparalleled strength, durability, and longevity. It's virtually maintenance free. Concrete's energy efficiency comes from its sheer mass, its ability to absorb the warm sun, especially in the winter months, and release that into the building. And then again, applying that custom form liner in a pattern that mimics that of the mullion pattern in the curtain wall to kind of tie the building design together all around. And then we're looking at a wood look metal panel ceiling, and then the composite decking for the deck itself. Again, kind of straying away from real wood, primarily from a maintenance and an upkeep standpoint, but also looking at the benefits of the composites and the wood look. Wood look metal paneling is recyclable. It brings a general sense of warmth to the overall exterior material palette. And again, mentioning that it's virtually maintenance free. And then the standing seam metal roof. So this will be fabricated with 100% recyclable metal or aluminum. It'll reduce the cooling costs through solar reflectance. And again, looking at the longevity and the durability of the material. And then we'll end with just a couple of general renderings taken from around the building, just to kind of pull and tie everything together. All right, with that is our presentation for you. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have for Greg or I, or even Ray, if you need to.
Thanks, guys. I would recommend keeping your screen share open just in case any pictures come about or any questions come about that need to be referenced with a slide.
Sure.
I think if anybody has any questions, I can't see hands or anything. Can you, Brandon? I don't think we even have that option on here tonight. So if you do have something, a question you'd like to ask, please just go, oh, wait, let me try this.
Yeah.
Okay, if you click on participants in the lower right corner, then you can see.
Right.
Okay, and then there are hands. You can put your hand up there, which would be just to the left of your video camera. Does anybody have any questions that you'd like to ask?
And I'm going to
Okay,
apologize
Lisa?
in advance because I can't see anybody's hands. So I'm just going to go old school and ask you to raise your hand, and if you have a question.
Oh, well, I
I don't
can
have my
see them, so
video
I
set up,
will.
but-
Lisa and Michelle had hands. Everybody's got their hands up now.
Greg, I can see the hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and call on them, okay? So let's ask Lisa first. She had her hand up first.
I just had a comment, and I wanted to say the building looks great. It sounds like it was a very well thought out process. The graphics are really cool to see, like how you have the building angled for the sun and everything. So I think that was an awesome presentation. I'm looking forward to seeing the final building when it's all said and done. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Let's go on to Michelle.
Okay, so I don't know how this rendering fits in with the native plants, but this is where my brain goes because it's pretty much my life thinking about the water line and how things run off from, generally turf grass and riprap right into the water. And I know you thought a lot about detention basins and, different things like that. But just from like this rendering and stuff, I'm wondering, is the native seed mix going to be along the river there? Or I don't remember from your pictures.
That's the thought. This rendering, it looks like turf. In fact, it's evolved since this rendering. So the building will be set in that native landscape. And the idea actually was to have the idea that the Riverwalk went through the native landscape. So you were trying to tie both sides of it together. So yeah, very little turf, but sometimes the rendering software makes it look all like turf.
And that's what I was thinking. I remember looking at
Yeah,
that and thinking, oh, that's really cool. They're incorporating so much,
Yeah.
native mix in there. But then on that picture, I'm like, wait, was it by the river?
No, yeah, there won't
So
be
I
people lay.
appreciate that.
I guess people can lay in the prairie. They're welcome to do that, but it's a little different experience. So, and in fact, one thing we added in the last round since those renderings is that bioswale along the river side of the building in front of the deck was something that wasn't showing up in the renderings as well. Yeah, that. So that was a recent addition of handling all the stormwater from the drop off, which again just adds another way to, one, it's cool from a native landscape perspective. It's got some habitat to it, and it just is a nice story of tying all the water together as well. And looking at water quality as well. I think that's all part of a treatment train for water quality. So hopefully, yeah, we'll try to get those updated, but where it looks like turf, picture that it's not.
Excellent.
It's hard for the
Thank
brain
you
to
so
do that
much.
sometimes. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. We would have definitely been making that recommendation if you weren't
Yeah.
already there. We feel kind of strongly about protecting the shoreland. Pat, you have your hand raised. Are you there, Pat? I can't hear you.
Okay, no, it looks like a lot of thought went into planning this. Just curiosity, I haven't really heard, so will the building be in general open to the public unless somebody's rented it out for their own private use? Or how is the building going to be used? I hadn't really heard. And that's maybe not for Smith Group, maybe that's more for the Parks Department, but
Yep.
I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
I can address that. What we see this is it's going to be utilized for a multitude. Just if you consider the large shelter down at South Park, the enclosed shelters that we call them down there, typically they're available only if you rent those or if there's a special event going on. One of the things that we plan on doing here, it'll be rentable, but also we see our department doing more programming out of there that the public's available. I mean, we're already having some discussions about some snowshoeing programs, cross-country ski programs going on out there, and then utilizing that assembly room for some warming areas and some activity programming as well for the department. So it's going to be a mixture of Parks Department events, private events, community events. So pretty much public use, yes.
So the building would be normally locked unless there's a program going on there, but people would be able to use the decks and stuff. Is that the idea?
That's correct.
Okay.
And the outdoor restroom as well, which starts
Would
to
be
serve
open.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Are the EV chargers a definite go, or is it going to be like EV charger ready, or there's a money set aside to install them, or how is that going?
I'll start there, and then Greg or Lee can jump in. It's a process we're working through right now. Brandon and I have had some conversations. I actually have been having some conversations over the last couple of days with Jim Collins, our transit director, because they are starting to look at other locations throughout the city. So what we want to do is whatever we put out there, we want to make sure it's something that can be utilized throughout the city in other areas. So it's really going to come down to us working with our city electrician, transit, and making sure all the departments that might be having these in the future, we're again trying to centralize what type of unit it might be. But we are definitely having those set up for charging stations, whether we became aware of some today that are solar powered. So it's something we're going to look into. So there's a lot of questions to be answered there, but we are looking at least the 4 spots right now for EV charging.
Okay, that's neat. Okay. And then is there like it looks like you put a lot of thought into making the building energy efficient, but do you have any estimate of the costs of, is there going to be like a furnace and an air conditioner, or just a furnace, or?
Yeah, they'll be both. There'll be a more traditional furnace. So it'll be heated and cooled just like any other building. What we're striving to do is reduce heating loads and reduce cooling loads by a number of the strategies that I explained earlier.
Sure. Are you able to estimate the energy costs, or I suppose it depends on how much the building's used, or?
We have not run through an energy model at this point. That is something that we will be doing in the next, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks. So as of right now, I'm not able to answer that question for you, but it's something that we will be doing shortly.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Well, looks like a lot of thought's gone into it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Did anybody else have a question? I don't see any other hands up at the moment. Okay, if not, I did have a few things I wanted to ask about. First, there's so many wonderful things here to celebrate. I love the way you've handled the natural heating, cooling, lighting through the building design, even if it is only mitigating part of the need for BTUs, but every little bit helps, right? One question that I do have, and I'll kind of run through all my good stuff, and then I'll try to remember to come back to my questions, I guess would be better. I want to really thank you for the consideration for the neighborhood. I know that there are many neighbors who are very appreciative of that, Ray, and the fact that you were able to keep those trees and that wildlife habitat as well as you did is just fantastic. I'm very impressed. And it was really neat the way that you showed us, Greg, all the different iterations of the plan and how it kept getting better and better. So that was pretty awesome. The sense of sensitivity to all the vegetation, frankly, was great. 2 questions that I did have, well, 3, I guess, maybe 4. I don't know. I have some questions. The aluminum roof, is that in any way, would it ever be able to support solar energy capture? I know that's a little hard to say right now because 20 years from now, we'll probably have very different technology for that. But was any thought given to the infrastructure of the building for using some kind of solar system on it ever?
We have not designed the roof to date to be able to accommodate PV panels on it. If that is something that the project wanted, we would, at this point, we would probably recommend kind of a standalone fixture that's on site that would not be attached to the building. But that is something that is not currently integrated into the design right now.
Okay, was it discussed at all? Was it ever considered?
It was not, I don't remember having a conversation about it. No.
Okay, thank you. I was also curious about the bathroom capacity. How many people can fill that assembly room?
It's designed for 125 people, and the plumbing, so there's a whole formula to determine the minimum required of plumbing fixtures. The interior restrooms can serve 2 occupants per gender. The exterior restrooms are family restrooms, so they're intended to serve 1 occupant per gender. But because they're family, they're really considered unisex restrooms. But 1 occupant.
Which is good. We need that now.
Yeah. So the exterior restrooms are unisex / family, gender neutral. 1 occupant per restroom. Interior restrooms are gender specific, and they serve 2 occupants per gender.
Okay, and just for my own personal curiosity, do you ever consider that it might be wise to have a larger capacity in the female restroom area?
So that's all taken into account in the plumbing calculations. It does actually lean to, it does provide more fixtures to women based on a certain occupancy, or sorry, a certain occupant load. It just so happened that the load that we were at, our minimum required are 2 fixtures for women and 2 fixtures for men. So it is a consideration, but we were just not required to provide more than 2 in this scenario.
A consideration that didn't weigh into this project, in other words, right?
Well, it's a consideration that we want to be mindful that we have a budget for the project, and any, you know, if we're adding fixtures that we don't, you know, technically need by code, where we're making the building bigger, we're adding more square footage, we're adding more material, etc. So we're trying to be respectful of the budget. We're trying to make an efficiently sized building as possible.
Got it. Next question, and I think you answered this mostly, Ray, but I'm still a little unsure, I guess. When you put in the parking lot, is it going to have infrastructure underneath it for those charging stations? Or are you planning to already have made the decision by then whether they're going to be just solar captured?
Right now, Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have parking lot lighting that we would be running conduit or infrastructure out there for electric charging stations, for electric operated. But just becoming aware of these potential solar units are something that we'll be looking into. But right now, our current plans call for, it won't go through the parking lot, it'll go on the perimeter through the turf areas.
But it would accommodate charging stations that were electrical.
Correct.
Captured, okay. Great, and thank you for adding that. That's really something that I think is really important. What is the planned life of this building and parking lot?
I mean, we try to make it as durable as possible. I mean, purely from the materials that we're selecting, at least from a building standpoint, and I could say the same for the site as well. You know, we're choosing materials that are both limited maintenance for park staff, but are also intended to last. So concrete is obviously a very durable material. Standing seam metal roof is much more durable and has a much longer lifespan than, say, an asphalt shingle roof. So I can't tell you exactly how long this building will last, but the materials we've selected are intentional in that this building will be around for a while, and with limited maintenance at that. So the composite decking is another example of that, where wood may have the potential to rot and need to be replaced over time. The wood look metal or the wood look composite decking that we're using has a longer lifespan, if you will.
That's fantastic. I mean, I assume that a municipal building is usually going to be expected to last 40, 50, maybe 75 years. And in that next period of time, there's likely going to be a lot of technology advancements that could really have a bearing on what maybe we should be thinking about now. So that's why I was asking. I see that Eric's hand is up. Are you still with us, Eric? Thank you.
Yes, I am. With the consideration of how close it is to the actual river itself, was any research done into using the river as a heat sink for geothermal or ground source heat pumps and cooling?
That was not a consideration for this project, no.
Okay.
I was considering that with the amount of with the lifespan expectancy and the overall savings for the life of those systems being that much longer. While granted, the initial cost is there greater than a traditional forced air heating system, and having that big of a heat sink, so to speak, to take all the workload off. I don't know if that would come in a cost savings measure for the city.
Yeah, I mean the initial startup cost of incorporating a system like that, you're correct, is quite a bit more than a more traditional system. We have made an effort to design the building and the glazing specifically to reduce the amount of glazing, to keep the amount of glazing to 40% or below the entire building envelope. And by doing so, and working with our mechanical engineers, we were able to incorporate one one furnace instead of two. If we didn't provide the shade to the curtain wall, to the glass that we are, or if there was more glass exposed than there is, that would trigger more heating load and more cooling load that's needed, and therefore bigger systems. But we've designed the building in such a way, both in orientation and with shade and shadow and all that, where we've been able to incorporate smaller systems and therefore, I guess, limit the amount of heating and cooling that's needed year round.
Okay, Pat, you have another question?
Yeah, Eric's question triggered something. You know, a while ago, we had that talk with that group that was talking about electrification of heating systems and talking about heat pumps. And I don't know enough about heat pumps to know the cost of that versus having a traditional air conditioning heating system. But is that something that would be possible here? And I don't know what, you know, I don't know what the savings are versus the initial cost, but is that something that would work here or not? My understanding with the heat pumps is you want a building that's very well, you know, insulated and tight and energy efficient already, but it sounds like you've put a lot of thought into making, you know, the building energy efficient in terms of the building envelope and stuff.
Yeah, and the cost of a heat pump is very project specific and it's very site specific. It honestly has not been a consideration in this project. We know that we're dealing with very unstable soils below this site, which we are addressing in the design. But we have not explored incorporating heat pump system into those projects at this time.
Yeah, so I don't think it would, you know, it's like what, as I understand a heat pump, it's like an air conditioner that can run backwards, right? So it's not involved in putting something into the ground. Is that right? That's my understanding of how a heat pump works. But
I was assuming you were speaking more about a geothermal.
No. I think the talk we heard from that MIT group was putting heat pumps into houses after the houses have become well insulated and good glass, you know, good windows and that kind of thing. And it's like, I don't know anybody in Wisconsin that has a heat pump. I know my parents had a heat pump in their house in Florida. It wasn't a geothermal system. It was basically an air conditioner that could run both ways, you know, so.
Yeah, I think, Pat, this is Brandon speaking. I think that part of the issue, even with the heat pumps for the state of Wisconsin, was that our energy is so dirty that getting one of those doesn't mitigate the overall problem. We would have to, as a state, have more energy created, you know, cleaner energy created overall in order for those heat pumps to make sense to use, I think was kind of the argument that they were making. And maybe some can refresh my memory if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't remember that, but and I know that in Wisconsin we're moving away from coal plants. They're being shut down and being replaced with cleaner. A lot of it's natural gas, but with renewable energies, there's a transition taking place. But anyway, okay, just a thought. I wondered if that had been thought about. So.
Nope, definitely well taken. Thanks for asking. I think I don't know if Ray can touch on this at all, but you know the cost of this project in general, beyond just the scope of the Four Seasons building, which is just what we're talking about today, is obviously one of the major factors with the entire creation of this new park. And so, you know, there may be some cost savings things that make sense to do. However, if the upfront cost is so grand, the city may not be able to find the funding to pay for that. So that's kind of the.
I understand that. It would be just a matter of pricing out what the heat pump would be versus the furnace and an air conditioning unit, and then, pricing out what would the cost be of running it and when would the payback, just doing a little investigation to check and see, does it make sense economically,
I do have one other question that's on a different subject. I'm wondering if any consideration was given to, instead of using asphalt and concrete, to using some kind of permeable paving for either the parking lot, the sidewalks, or both. Given that it is right on the water, that's an awful big area to have a hard space, especially when you consider the building. I mean, that's mitigated pretty much by the roof runoff, but have you considered any kind of permeable pavement options?
I'm trying to think that one. I think I'm trying to think of why we chose a more of a the bioswale approach. I'm trying to think back to our soils. I know we got a high water table, so infiltration I think might have been a bit of a challenge with that. And I'm trying to think if maybe some of the soils were more conducive to swales than infiltration. So I think that was one of the issues, and I think we're tying into some of the existing drainage systems out here. So in the end, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're recharging natural systems. We're just doing it through swales instead of sucking it straight through. I know we did have some conversations about alternatives to bituminous for the parking lot, and I think that, from a heat island perspective, that became more of a cost issue than it was, a technical issue. But from the stormwater, I don't recall exactly a comparison on the permeables, but my gut is that they were probably virtually equal in terms of benefits, and especially with the site that we have here, I think we feel like this is still a pretty sustainable approach of going to a bioswale, strategy.
I'll argue that currently I do believe that permeable pavers are only permitted in patio applications per city ordinance, zoning ordinance. That's what one of the UWO students the groups are working on, is doing some research to try to determine if permeable pavers should be allowed in other applications beyond patios in the city of Oshkosh. So I don't think
Well,
currently code
the
would even allow it.
municipality can be a leader in these things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that was all the questions I had. I don't
Sure.
see any other hands up. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to add or ask? Or all right then. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Ray, for arranging this for us. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Greg, and where did his picture go? Oh, there you
Lee.
are.
Yeah,
Greg
Lee's
and
back.
Lee. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're back. For sharing with us. We do greatly appreciate it. I assume if we have any other questions, we can always ask Ray, and he will he'll put them forward for us. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank
All right.
you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, Ray.
Okay, moving on then. Native plant brochure update, Michelle. Do we have anything on that?
I don't have much. So the only thing I was thinking is, from our discussion last time, the way I was conceptualizing this is really we have more than one need for a brochure, right? So we want to have something that talks about the native plants that we're utilizing in Menominee Park at our sites, right? And we also wanted to have something as a resource for people who may want to native landscape with, native plants, shrubs, and trees, and things like that. So I was kind of seeing two different things, right? Maybe one to, talk about the shoreline restoration projects, and maybe something that's more geared towards businesses or private homeowners that want to utilize native plants in their landscaping. So that was just kind of the framework that I kind of thought up in the meantime, but that's the only status that I have for progress at this point. And let me know if I'm off in that conceptualization of what we were talking about.
It sounds to me like that's right on to what we've been thinking all along, so that it will require more than one, yeah. Because there's lots of different things they can do, and they can mix them all together then too.
More education, the better.
Exactly. Okay, well then we'll move on to the duck ordinance. Brandon does have an update for us on that, and then I want to address some of the information from the Polko poll. Try and say that 3 times fast. Did you want me to go first, Brandon, or did you want to lead off on this?
It's up to you. I mean, if you want to take the lead on it, go for it. I added it in the meeting packet so everybody had a chance to hopefully look through it. I don't know if there's any questions about it. It's just simply the data as of now. I did extend. I had the deadline for it extended to like June something. So hopefully, we want to look at it again in the future. We'll have some more responses maybe.
Can you give us a little bit of background on how a Polko poll appears? Like, where does it come from? How did it get onto the site for people to respond to? Who wrote the
Sure.
questions?
So you can remember at the last meeting, I had said we're going to do a poll. Here's other questions that I wrote. Does anybody have any input or feedback? And I think Bob had some comments about why it was being done, which we addressed in an email later. I didn't get any responses on what if there were any questions that needed to be changed or edited or additional questions. So I just went ahead and submitted it, and then it goes to Oshkosh Media, and they have admin rights, I guess, to a poll call survey, and so they kind of put the survey together and push it out to the public. I think if you sign up, you maybe get an email that says, "Hey, your city government has a new survey for you to fill out if you'd like to participate." Basically, it's just a link. You saw I had put it out on the Facebook page as well. We can do that again a couple times to continue hopeful sharing of that link to activate more responses. We may be able to, I don't know if this is possible, edit the survey now, maybe. I'm not sure if they're, if we're getting some responses and we think that we need to address something, we may be able to edit it. I'm not sure though, but does that
Yeah,
answer your
I'm
question,
sure.
Marty? Or
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
If we edited it now, it would probably mess up all the data. Michelle had a question or comment, I think.
Yeah. So are we basically pushing out, when we push out the survey's deadline back, does that mean we're pushing out any progress that we can have on any ordinance changes or getting this duck ordinance passed? Or are we kind of contingent on our progress on the results of this, or?
No, it was just set to end like today or something. So I just I know someone had a concern last time about it being, or maybe it was a private conversation that me and Margie had outside of the meeting. So I just had set it back so there was more time, and we can end it at any moment.
Are we able, I think what she's asking is, are we able to do anything further on the resolution until we say the poll has ended and use that data? And Bob has something to share too, I see. He's
Yeah, I'm
doing a
not too
different
sure
hand
on
thing.
like what's the sufficient amount of responses needed, or what, I don't know how long it's supposed to be open for in order for that to be a decent period of time. I would say, I mean, there's 100 and I forget what it was, 118 responses as of the 29th. So I'm assuming there might be some more. Bob, I don't know, do you have any idea on previous poll call statistics from Common Council, or?
I don't, but and I think it just comes back to our general conversation that you and I had along with Mark through email, Mark Lyons, about it just being a general tool to use to kind of gauge how those that are interested in that issue feel about, how they want to attempt to shape, the ordinance in regards to that. So just like chickens, ducks are not like this overarching community issue. Not everyone's interested in them. It's not their, you know, their big issue. So frankly, I think 118 is a pretty good number for people to be talking about something that's generally not talked about in a community at all. So
Yeah, I was surprised.
so for me, this just kind of shapes some of the peripheral conversations that we've been having about aligning the chicken ordinance and the duck ordinance a little bit. That's what I kind of took from those questions, was seeing, you know, is there support? Yeah, there's support. There's some support for a duck, you know, for a duck ordinance. But clearly people understand chickens more than they do ducks from the data. So, but that doesn't mean that we don't go forward with something either. So,
I was
you know, so
interested
that's,
that sorry, Bob, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was interested in seeing the final question, right, about the number of, to increase it from
yeah,
4 up to 5, and it's very clear that people who want more they just went right for the 6, and the people who don't want any or less went right for the 4, and it's very split, almost 50-50. So that was interesting.
Well, and that was sort of what I wanted to address about reading the results, and I'm sure you guys read some of these comments too, but it was very interesting to me that we could have, you know, 3 out of every 4 people saying no, they are not interested in keeping chickens, and yet they had way more "why are you interested" responses than we had people who said that they were interested, and some of those were just no, because I live in an apartment. Okay, did that really answer the question? So is that data that we keep in there or not? It was also, when we asked about ducks, it was quite clear from many of the responses that people either just don't understand what raising ducks is about, but then they also had probably said no, they weren't interested. So it was I guess I'm a little concerned that when this poll information goes to the council for consideration for the resolution, that we be sure and point out that there was no information given to the people who responded to this poll about what the resolution would actually say, that it's not ducks that can fly, it's not ducks that are wild. It's, you know, there were a lot of factors that we took into writing that resolution, as far as we've gotten so far, that because the public didn't have that information for their response to the poll, their responses were very, well, you could tell who actually knew about raising ducks because they wrote a lot of very good information. And that's probably something that would be really good to share when we bring this forward. I mean, I think saying, no, I don't think people should be allowed to keep ducks because ducks fly and I have a serious problem keeping the wild ones out of my pool. I see ducks more as wild animals that should not be kept in a cage. Well, they're not kept in a cage in our resolution. That's not part of the deal at all. And they don't fly. So there were many things here that are going to need addressed later, is all, I guess. But
yeah, we'll just want to make sure that, again, like you had said, we'll just double check the resolution, the current draft, and make sure that, you know, those things are addressed in there, right? Because those are things that we should make sure people are aware of when we're talking about descriptions and stuff.
And I think, Mark, you bring up a good point in regards to, like, you know, the idea that if members of the community are asking questions like that, because obviously we're not used to ducks being considered as pets and providing food and stuff like that in our communities. The reality is that those might be the same questions that, you know, council members have as well. And so along with, you know, and I'm probably suggesting something that I'm going to probably end up having to do because I'm suggesting it, is to kind of take that, you know, take a little bit of time based off the Polco study and just kind of create a fact sheet, you know, about responses related to that. Because, you know, this is going to be given to the council members. It's going to be part of that information that they look at. And if they just look at those responses and believe those responses, then that's doing a disservice to all the work that, you know, that the board has done for the last year and a half related to this. So I
Well, and
guess
actually, Bob, though I appreciate you volunteering very much, I think we may already have fact sheets like that we have available. And so we would be making sure that we distributed those along with the resolution. But we can take a look at those fact sheets now with this additional POCO information and see if they need some additional information added. So yeah, that's a good point. I'll send them to you and you can take a look at them.
Okay. And the other thing that I would say, just from a historical perspective and being around when we created the chicken ordinance, the chicken ordinance was developed similarly, but a lot differently than how this has been done. There were a couple of public forums, and you remember this, Margie, because you were on the board at the time. There were a couple of public forums that were built around educating the community around you know, the chicken, having chickens, and so it was a lot different process. We didn't have POCO then, so we couldn't.
We didn't have the internet back then yet, did we?
Barely.
Yeah.
But I think that's, you know, we did a lot more public outreach than we did for the chickens than we have been or been able to do
Exactly.
at this point too. So and that's where, you know, a little bit more of those introductory and educational and fact sheet type materials will go a long ways with the council as well. So
Definitely. Okay, well, we've got that on our list now. Anything else on the duck ordinance that you wanted to share, Brandon, or did anybody else have any questions or comments?
I have one more, sorry.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
I was
okay.
just gonna say too, I think what I'll do is I will just check in and see, you know, if this many responses is sufficient, and then I would say maybe we're ready to kind of get the ball rolling again.
Definitely.
And I don't know what that number is, you know, and I don't know how they can come up with that, how that number can be determined from issue to issue, you know what I mean? So
Maybe it's
I
just a
think-
time frame too.
Sure. So then my other comment too is that when we did pass the chicken ordinance several years ago, there was a limiting factor that we don't necessarily have at this point, is that you had to have the permission of all of your neighbors at that time. And that really prohibited a lot of people from going out and getting the chicken ordinance, because it was very challenging to do it at that point. And so we don't have that. But even when that was put into place, we didn't have a large group of people, community members that were chomping at the bit to making this happen. It kind of progressively got more and more people to be involved in it. You know, through some people doing it because they wanted to do it and didn't want to tell the city they were doing it. You know, but the reality is that, and then eventually we amended that ordinance to make it easier for people to do that. So, but the point is that yes, we make the ordinance, council passes the ordinance. There isn't going to be a large group of people. We're going to probably see the same transition where we ramp up over time, people, you know, having ducks as pets and on their property. So, so just kind of looking at from a progressive view of how this stuff grows, than just looking at it from this perspective. Oh, there's going to be tons of people that go out there and get those permits if and when it's passed. That's not going to be the case. We know that it's going to be a kind of a slow movement.
You know, it was the summer of 2011 that we passed the chicken ordinance. So that's been 10 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Hard to believe that was 10 years ago. And I remember at the time being upset that people had to ask their neighbors to have a chicken because of the noise when we had dogs in our neighborhood that kept us awake all night long. Yeah. Okay, well then, seeing no other hands up, I'm going to move along to the social media discussion, which really without Vic here tonight, I should ask, have you all been checking out that site occasionally? It's good to go in, you know, if you go in and like our post, that's awesome, but it's even better if you share our post, because if every time you share it, it gets more hits basically, but it helps it become more viable on Facebook. So I would continue to encourage everybody who cares about us to check out our Facebook page frequently, and if possible, Brandon, if you can be tagging other groups that may, pertain, when Ray was talking about the building and the new Four Seasons building, what else that assembly area would be awesome for? Ready? How about a rain barrel workshop? Isn't that perfect? Ah, I was afraid to say that earlier. Anyway, did you have anything you wanted to share on the social media, Brandon?
I mean, the page has not, today I didn't even have time to put the agenda on there. I mean, it was there was some COVID issues in our department, so a lot of people working from home, and then we have planner of the day, which I ended up being like 4 times in the last 7 days. So I was kind of overwhelmed. It is permitting season, a lot of fence and pool permits and stuff. So again, I'll just my soapbox here. If you got anything that comes across the Facebook you think is something that should be on the page, just send it my way. Always needing more stuff to post, so don't be shy. Send me an email.
And additionally, I would advocate for all of us to work on getting more time dedicated to sustainability. I know that's just what Brandon wants. I know you like sustainability, but you are a planner, so I get that both are important to you. Okay, agenda items for future meeting. Other than the duck ordinance, which obviously we have. I did not think to ask Ray what the timing was on the Four Seasons building. Do you know if we can bring that back next month for further discussion, if we've had any thoughts on it, or has that ship sailed?
You mean like as far as design, or what's your question?
No, not design, but if we think of other things. I mean, I think we were pretty complete about thoughts on ways that it could be sustainably improved. But if we did have any epiphanies between now and next month, I don't know if we just share those with Ray or if we bring it back for a discussion item. We can check into that. It
might just be better to filter it through me, and I can voice those concerns or wants, desires to Ray maybe. The park as a whole is maybe something the board should be looking at. That there's some want to do solar panels, at a city level. There's enough space there to just mount those right on the ground.
I was actually going to suggest that when they were given their presentation, is that there's an ample amount of space there to put a solar array, just a small one that would be
just as an illustration, a pilot project to show people that this can be done.
Education.
Yep.
And if it's done for the EV chargers, well, that's great, but it would probably be good if they were, what's the word, hybrid anyway? I don't know if that works, but.
The other, I ended up having to take a phone call during that time, so I'm sorry that I didn't interject my thoughts at that point. But I had the thought of also having and I don't know if you guys brought it up, but having like a shoreline restoration site at the end of Pinoqua. So you've got that deck that overlooks the river there, that also oversees, that the river walk there, and then between the river walk and the river there being some type of shoreline restoration site as well, might be go right in line with the educational aspect of sustainability and waterways as well. So
I think they had native plants put into the design there, because I asked that question.
Did you?
Yeah, because their later pictures showed a lot of turf and riprap, and I was like, was that one of the areas you could put native plants? Was that already in your plans? And he said, yeah. He showed the picture again where they had all along the river there was native plants, both on either sides of the river walk. So
a suggestion might be though
Go
I
ahead.
was going to say a suggestion might be for them to include signage to go along with it, like we have in Menominee Park, so that people would know what they were looking at and could appreciate the fact, what it's there for. And it's not just pretty, it's also, useful. So I think we should pass that along, Brandon. Pat.
I was just curious, what's the square footage of the indoor area of the Four Seasons building?
Oh, gee, I saw that somewhere. You can find that at our board site. In some of their I was going through some of their past meeting minutes.
I think what I was asking about was an air source heat pump, not a geothermal pump, but I'm not sure they understood that and I didn't use the right terminology. But I'd be willing to look into that and see what the expense of that is versus a traditional gas furnace. I really don't know, but it might depend on what kind of area you're trying to heat,
Pat, any information you find, your research you want to do regarding the differences or some study that's already been accomplished for, this climate and by all means, you can pass it right along to Ray probably on your own, I think. I mean, I don't know if that has to be filtered through me or not, but his email is public.
Yeah, I guess one thing that would maybe affect that would be how large an area you're trying to heat. So that's why I was wondering about the square footage of the building.
I'm sure that information somewhere. I can definitely try to find it for you to help you with that, to get you that answer, and then you can kind of start what you want to do.
The height of the ceilings too, I suppose. I suppose the volume that you're trying to heat, but I suppose you don't need to heat. If it has real high ceilings, you don't need to heat the area near the ceilings, I guess, as well as down where people are. But
at our next meeting, I just realized it's actually going to be the students reporting. They have requested more than once that we do it as an in-person meeting. And of course, we'll probably still deny the fact that we're not doing in-person meetings with the city right now. But that is what our next meeting will mostly be around. So if we have that and we give an update on our usual stuff, and we may have something on Menominee Park by then, Michelle, or?
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we could have that on there.
Okay, let's put Menominee Park report on too.
Is the solar group buy something to wait on? Considering a solar group buy, the city sponsoring one, is that something to wait for, put down further down the line, or?
We can put it down for a future meeting yet, but it's not going to happen in May because we just won't have time.
Much other stuff to do, yeah.
Yeah, the big thing with solar in general in the city of Oshkosh is that it currently in the zoning ordinance requires a conditional use permit, which is expensive. I mean, it's a couple $100. So the city of Oshkosh currently still considers solar array as a conditional use of your residential property. So that might answer that question 18 that you had posed. I don't know if it does or not, or if I already answered that for you in an email, but so like, as solar becomes more prevalent, we only see like 1 or 2 solar permits a year. So as that gets increased more and more and more, there may be some look at that ordinance to try to remove the conditional use permit requirement. But as of now, I don't see any movement happening on getting rid of that.
Okay, that's in addition to any kind of electrical permit you have to get for redoing your wiring, or?
The conditional use permit is something that gets reviewed by Plan Commission.
Okay.
And then so the permit for everything else can't even be issued until that conditional use permit is approved by Plan Commission. So it's a process. And
is that for putting on your roof or putting anywhere on your property?
I believe it goes for anywhere.
Anywhere. I thought I saw Lisa's hand up before. Did I, Lisa? Did you have something to share?
Yeah. I was just going to say, with Earth Day coming up this month, maybe it would be a good idea for us to post on social media and have a few posts. If people come across them, send them to Brandon. I know there are a couple events going on at UWO. There's some cleanups from volunteer groups, but if people take pictures of them at an event or something, we could always post that on social media.
That's a great idea. And maybe you could do the the cross-reference thing with the university too, because I know they always post a ton of stuff. I'll look and see if I can
absolutely.
find anything. Well, Lisa, you
Okay.
you'll be monitoring that anyway, won't you?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, that'd be awesome. Thank you. And thank you for thinking of that. I kind of forgot it's April already. Okay, well then, if there's no further business, our next meeting will be on Monday, May 3rd. It will include our reports from the student projects. That will be our main focus. And I would request someone to motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay, I'm sorry, Brandon, but you do have to call the roll for this also.
All right, so just to make sure that was Michelle and Bob.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, roll call here. Margie,
Yes. Aye.
Pat,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all for coming. See you next month.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.